It started with a quiet morning in the small, picture-perfect community of Maple Ridge. The kind of neighborhood that looked like it had been lifted straight out of a real estate magazine, trimmed lawns, white fences, and smiling faces that only appeared when cameras were around. Beneath all that, though, the war ruled with an iron fist. They prided themselves on preserving community standards, but to Marcus Reed, it always felt like a fancy way of saying they didn't want him there. Marcus was one of the few black homeowners in the area. He had bought his land 5 years ago, a 5-acre property on the edge of the neighborhood, bordered by a gentle creek that wound its way through the backyards of several houses. That creek wasn't just a pretty feature. It was natural drainage from the hills above, a lifeline for wildlife and the reason the area didn't flood during heavy rain. Marcus, a civil engineer and environmental consultant, loved it. He'd even spent his weekends restoring parts of the creek bank, planting native vegetation, and installing small stone barriers to prevent erosion. But not everyone appreciated his work. The HOA board, led by a man named Gary Hutchins, who'd been re-elected so many times it felt like a monarchy, claimed Marcus's modifications violated community design codes. They said his rock placements interfered with water flow, and that the greenery made the neighborhood look unkempt. Marcus tried reasoning with them, even invited Gary to walk the creek with him to explain the ecological benefits. Gary never showed. Instead, Marcus received a $3,500 fine and a threat of legal action. Then, one morning, Marcus woke to the sound of heavy machinery. He ran outside to see 2 cement trucks parked near the creek and a crew of men in bright orange vests setting up barriers. "What's going on here?" Marcus demanded. "HOA project," one of the workers grunted. "We've been told to fill the drainage channel. Supposed to prevent mosquito breeding or something." Marcus froze. Fill the creek. That wasn't just foolish, it was illegal. "That's not a drainage channel," he said. "It's a natural stream. You can't just pour concrete in it. You'll block the entire watershed." The worker shrugged. "Talk to your HOA, man. We just do what we're paid for." By the time Marcus got hold of Gary, it was too late. The cement was already being poured, layer after layer, thick gray sludge covering the stones, the plants, and the water itself. "Gary, you can't do this," Marcus said over the phone. "That creek drains runoff from the upper ridge. You're going to flood half the neighborhood." Gary laughed. "Oh, please, we hired a landscaper," he said. "It's fine. You're overreacting." For the next week, Marcus tried to stop the project. He called the county, sent letters to the environmental agency, even showed them maps proving that the creek was part of a protected watershed. But bureaucracy moved slowly, and the HOA moved fast. Within days, the entire creek through Maple Ridge was sealed under a ribbon of concrete. It looked neat, flat, clean, and lifeless. Gary called it an improvement. Then came the rain. It started with a drizzle one Thursday night, nothing unusual. But by dawn, it had turned into a relentless downpour. Marcus stood on his porch, watching the water run off his lawn like it always did, until it didn't. Instead of flowing smoothly down the creek's path, it pooled near the edge of the concrete barrier. Then it started to spread. By noon, parts of the street were underwater. By evening, basements began to flood. The storm drains couldn't handle the volume, and the water had nowhere to go. From his porch, Marcus could hear shouting down the block. Gary's pristine white SUV was stuck halfway in his driveway, tires spinning in rising water. "Marcus," he yelled, wading toward him. "What's happening? What's happening?" Marcus said, his voice steady. "Is exactly what I told you would happen. You blocked the drainage. The creek can't carry runoff anymore." Gary's face turned red, though whether from panic or shame, it was hard to tell. "You have to do something. You're an engineer." "Oh, now you want my help," Marcus said. "You destroyed a natural waterway. I can't fix stupidity with a wrench." The next few days were chaos. Dozens of homes flooded. Lawns turned into swamps. The HOA's prized gardens drowned in muddy water. The community Facebook group exploded with angry posts, people demanding to know who approved the concrete project. Gary tried to shift the blame to the landscaping company, but the permits and emails told a different story. He had pushed the decision through himself, ignoring environmental regulations. Marcus didn't gloat. He didn't have to. He just filmed everything: the flooding, the waterlogged homes, the homeowners sloshing through knee-deep puddles, and sent it all to the county's environmental department. Within a week, investigators arrived. They found multiple violations, from unpermitted construction to the destruction of a protected stream. The HOA was fined hundreds of thousands of dollars, and the county ordered the concrete removed immediately, at the HOA's expense. The cleanup took months. By then, Gary had resigned, citing personal reasons. The new board, desperate to repair the neighborhood's image, came to Marcus for advice. He didn't rub it in. Instead, he helped design a sustainable restoration plan, one that used his original eco-friendly designs. The creek was reborn, even healthier than before. When the next storm came, the water flowed smoothly again, winding through the restored channel. Neighbors watched from their porches, relieved. And Marcus, standing by the water's edge, smiled quietly to himself. Maple Ridge was the kind of place that could fool you at first glance. Rows of pastel-colored homes, each perfectly trimmed with matching hedges, wrapped neatly around winding streets named after trees that no longer grew there. Neighbors smiled politely when passing each other on morning jogs, and the HOA newsletter arrived each month with the same slogan stamped on top in bold, "Preserving perfection together." To outsiders, it looked like a peaceful, well-run community. But to the people who lived under the HOA's thumb, especially those who didn't fit its unspoken mold, it felt more like a kingdom ruled by fear and favoritism. Marcus Reed had learned that the hard way. When he first moved to Maple Ridge 5 years ago, he thought he'd found a slice of quiet country life. His property sat on the edge of the development, with a small creek that curved along his backyard and disappeared into a patch of thick forest. It was what sold him on the place, the sound of running water at night, the birds that gathered near the reeds at dawn. The creek wasn't just beautiful, it was natural drainage for the entire neighborhood, carrying rainwater downhill from the ridge above. Marcus saw it as a living system, something to care for, not control. Marcus wasn't just any homeowner, he was an environmental engineer with 15 years of experience in flood mitigation. His days were spent designing drainage systems and water retention plans for the county. When he wasn't at work, he could usually be found near that creek, working on small restoration projects, stacking stones to prevent erosion, planting native grasses, and removing debris that might block the current. The sound of water over rock was his therapy. But his peaceful work didn't go unnoticed. It started with a letter in his mailbox one spring afternoon, the HOA's official seal printed in neat blue ink. "Dear Mr. Reed," it began, "it has come to our attention that modifications have been made to the community waterway in violation of Section 8.3 of the Maple Ridge Aesthetic Code." Marcus read it twice before letting out a low, disbelieving laugh. They were talking about his creek. Their community waterway. He called the HOA office right away. The woman who answered transferred him to the board president, a man named Gary Hutchins, a retiree with a bad temper and an even worse habit of using his position to bully homeowners into submission. "Mr. Hutchins," Marcus began, keeping his voice calm, "I received a notice about my creek restoration. I think there's been a misunderstanding." Gary didn't let him finish. "It's not your creek, Mr. Reed. That's community property. You can't just do whatever you want with it. We've received complaints that it looks messy and unnatural." "Messy," Marcus repeated, glancing out at the green plants swaying in the current. "It's an ecosystem. What I'm doing prevents flooding and supports wildlife. You can't just fill or alter a stream like this without consulting environmental services." "It's protected land," Gary scoffed. "I'll decide what's protected and what isn't. The community voted on keeping everything looking uniform. We don't need wild weeds and rocks cluttering up the view. Fix it, or we'll fine you." The call ended with Gary threatening to issue a citation. Marcus thought about fighting it in court but decided it wasn't worth the headache, not yet. He'd dealt with bureaucratic egos before. Maybe if he showed Gary the science behind it, the man would understand. But he never got the chance. A week later, Marcus woke up to the low rumble of engines. When he stepped outside, he saw 2 cement trucks idling by the edge of his property. A crew of workers in orange vests were unloading hoses and rebar. For a moment, Marcus thought it had to be a mistake. Then he saw the markers, orange flags driven into the ground along the creek's path, stretching down through the neighborhood. His stomach dropped. "Excuse me," he called, jogging toward them. "What's going on here?" One of the workers looked up from his clipboard. "HOA project," he said simply. "We're filling this drainage channel per community order." "Drainage channel," Marcus repeated. "That's a creek. It's a live stream with a natural outflow. You can't just fill it." The man shrugged. Orders from your HOA. Talk to them. Marcus didn't waste time. He grabbed his phone and called Gary. You need to stop this right now, he said the moment the man answered. You're about to destroy a protected waterway. That creek carries runoff for half the neighborhood. If you fill it, you'll cause flooding. Gary's voice came through the line with an exasperated sigh. Relax, Marcus. We consulted a landscaper. He said it'll help with mosquito control and make the area look more uniform. You worry too much. You're making a huge mistake, Marcus warned. There are environmental laws against this. You're talking about altering a natural watershed. Then file a complaint, Gary snapped. But as far as we're concerned, this is community improvement. Enjoy your new view. Marcus stood helpless as the cement hoses roared to life. Thick gray concrete spilled into the channel, covering the stones, the plants, and the glistening surface of the creek. The water hissed as it met the spreading mixture, steam curling into the cool air. Within hours, the once lively stream was buried beneath a ribbon of hardened cement. Birds circled overhead, confused by the sudden loss of water. Marcus's heart sank. That evening, he walked the length of the newly sealed drainage channel. It was eerily silent. No running water, no frogs croaking from the banks, no reflection of the trees overhead. Just a dull strip of gray that cut through the neighborhood like a scar. The other residents seemed pleased. He overheard one woman say, "Finally, it looks clean." Another nodded approvingly. No more muddy smells. The HOA did the right thing. Marcus wanted to shout, to tell them they'd just destroyed the thing that protected their homes from nature's fury. But he held his tongue. He knew time would do the talking for him. Over the next week, he filed reports with the county's environmental agency. He sent photos, maps, and documentation proving that the creek was part of a protected watershed system. But bureaucracy was slow, and paperwork even slower. Gary and his board, meanwhile, paraded the project as a success story, sending out a glossy newsletter with photos of the new, improved waterway. Marcus could only shake his head. He'd seen this story before, in neighborhoods where people thought they could outsmart nature. They'd pave over what they didn't understand, all for the sake of appearance. But nature always had a way of reclaiming what was hers. So he waited, quietly, patiently, because deep down, Marcus knew that the creek they buried wasn't gone, it was only hidden. And when the rains came, the water would remember its path. And when it did, Maple Ridge would finally learn what happens when arrogance tries to concrete over common sense.